Welcome to the Her Voice Shines podcast, where we celebrate the power, brilliance, and resilience of women everywhere. I'm your host, Shanasia Washington. Join us as we share inspiring stories and insights from extraordinary women who have found their voice and are making a difference. Together, we'll create a ripple effect, illuminating the path to visibility and empowerment. Let's break barriers, shatter ceilings, and lift each other up. In each episode, we dive deep into the journeys of women who have turned their challenges into triumphs and their dreams into reality. Whether you're looking for motivation, guidance, or a community that understands your journey, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and remember, let your voice shine. Let your voice shine. You have listened to the Her Voice Shines podcast. I'm your fabulous host, Shanasia Washington, streaming from the beautiful Houston, Texas. I'm going to tell you Happy New Year. Like, I'm still in 2025 recording this, but I know when you see this, you're going to be in a new year and hopefully doing amazing, amazing things. And let me tell you something, guys. I know I've said in the past few episodes, I'm just trying to figure out, is this really winter? I was just telling my guests it's like 82 degrees outside. I'm in here with like a dress with a shoulder off. I don't know what's happening, but send me some love and just a little bit of cool temperatures from wherever you are. But let me tell you something. I've already had a pre-show with my guest. I already love her. I'm so ready for her to come out here and do our normal drill, which just tell us her name, where she's streaming from, and we want to know the magic of her story. Without any further waiting time, here is my very beautiful guest for today.
Well, hello. Thank you so much for that introduction and for having me here. I really appreciate you and your audience and being able to come on your platform. My name is Jackie Suzanne Rubio, and I just launched a book called From Murder to Messages. And unfortunately, the book is a true story of my journey through my son's murder and into the messages that I received from him now. And I have quite a life history. I've got quite a life story, and I'll try to make it the shortest version ever. I'm a recovered alcoholic. I was an extreme alcoholic. I was a single mom with 4 kids. I was a teen mom. I struggled with obesity, drugs, alcohol. I would say also a lot of different kinds of struggles that kind of from my childhood, a lot of abuse, a lot of sexual abuse, physical abuse, not very good education on my part. And somehow I sit in front of you today from Eastern Oregon. It's a little bit cold right now, not as cold as it normally is. So we are having a little bit of a warm trend also. So that's a little bit about me.
Miss Jackie, thank you. There was actually a lot of information shared, and we know it's short and cute, but we're going to get into it because I've already seen some victories, right? You sitting here telling me, look, I battled alcoholism. My son was murdered, and there's other layers here that I have to ask you, but I always have to start right now, today, and give you your roses because you don't look like what you've been through. And you've made the conscious decision to turn, a lot of people would like to say, mess into message. So I have to honor you that and give you that right now on the spot before we even get into this. I didn't expect to start here, but let me go here because I really wasn't going to dive into the piece about alcoholism. Tell me about that battle. When did that become a battle? And then why do you think that was a part of your story? Because sometimes people can tie the moment right into like I knew that this was alcoholism when it became this excessive. They can tie it back to that. They can sometimes tie it back to an emotion that made them feel they had to drink that much. So tell us about that battle a little bit and really the moment in which you knew that this is a major problem, and then give us like a little bit of aftermath on how that kind of played your life.
Yeah. So the alcoholism for me, I was a fun drunk for a long time. I was, the life of the party. And oh boy, did I like to party. I had a heck of a social life. I was also like a real big girl. And it never stopped me. I sang and danced and, just had a ton of friends. And the alcoholism, it was fun until it wasn't. And there came a point in time, I kept getting DUIs. It was really difficult on my children and my household. It was like, people coming and going, and, sometimes mom was there to cook dinner. Sometimes she wasn't. It was chaos. And at first it was sort of disguised with fun. We had, I've always had horses and some property and stuff. So we always were sort of the place to be. For the cowboys or for the singers, for music, people who are really into music. We always had something going on out at the house. And I just remember there was a time after 2 DUIs and, my kids all being so, irritated with me, and just our household constantly, in fist fights and things like that. And I couldn't stop drinking. It wasn't fun anymore. And I ended up having the weight loss surgery. And I honestly have to tell you, I believe that that's the time when everything changed. It became where I was physically dependent on the alcohol. I couldn't drink nearly as much as I used to. I was losing a bunch of weight, and I was also losing my identity in the process of that. I was going through a lot, but I'd take a drink, and I would start to get the shakes. And if I drank too much, I would immediately black out. Nobody wanted to take me out anymore because I couldn't stand up out on the dance floor. And it only took a drink or two for me to, behave like that. So my journey actually led me to decide to make a geographic move from Oregon to Texas. I thought, well, if I'm not with the same friends, or if I'm not in the same town that I partied in so much, that I'll get a fresh break and I'll be able to quit drinking. And the county that I moved to was actually a dry county. So they didn't even sell hard liquor there, but it really just didn't matter. Where I was is where I was. Where I was, my alcoholism was, and I would go from, okay, well, I can't drink. I was a whiskey drinker. I loved Pendleton whiskey, bourbon, Jack Daniels, Black Velvet, just real hard liquor. And I can't drink that anymore. So then I would start to drink like a vodka or gin. And it's like I'd black out on that. So I couldn't drink that anymore. And then I went to wine for a while. And it was the same story over and over again. And I just kept trying to figure out a way to drink that I could, handle the alcohol, where I didn't, act the way that I was acting, black out. And I got to where I was like completely incontinent. I couldn't hold my bladder when I was drinking. And my mind was just deteriorating. I couldn't remember things. I was anxious all the time. I was shaking. I was hallucinating. And I think that the story, I got to a point where I would sit in a recliner and I would buy a big box of beer. And honestly, I wouldn't know if it was 2:00 in the morning or 2:00 in the afternoon. And I'd pass out and I would wake up and I'd just immediately drink the beer in my hand, whether it was warm or old, it didn't matter. I just had to have that. And I just realized, I was like, I can't, I felt a little suicidal, and I just cried out to God, and I just said, please, I can't live like this anymore. I need help. And within a couple of days of that terrible crash, that fear that I can't quit drinking, that I'm going to die like this. And, I had ostracized my whole family, my sisters, my kids. And within a few days of that, I actually found myself on the way to rehab. So I was able to, get sober, but I didn't stay sober. I immediately met a man that was very toxic. I say that he has more demons than I do. We entered into a relationship, and within about a year, year and a half of that, it was real bad, and I relapsed. I actually started a fire in the house on accident, but I ended up in the burn unit in Galveston. I was in a coma for 10 days. I had 3 third-degree burn surgeries with over 33% of my body, and 3 skin graft surgeries. So, that was my last drink, and that was September 7th of 2020.
Thank you for sharing that. Definitely a lot of emotion for me hearing that, because not only was it, of course, alcoholism is always the aftermath of it. It's the family ties, and then it's also to that susceptibility to being in situations, like you said, where you actually attract more toxicity. And that is a common thing that happens because, you're not all along your healing process. And believe it or not, like you said, people can pick that up and they will attract you like a magnet. And that's exactly what happened. Um, did not realize that your story had that many layers. Wasn't expecting to hear, that you were a burn survivor and all the different things. And it's still fairly new. You said that you have been completely clean since 2020. I mean, we're in 2025. I mean, in the ideal world, because you were tied to that for so long, it's still a fairly new journey with you. And I want to, for one, say congratulations for taking that step to save your life and standing in it. And I wish you many more years of sobriety, and may your life take you in places and directions that, even if they're challenging, that you don't use it as a crutch to navigate what's going on, because you've done a great deal in working on yourself and getting to this point. And I can see that. Now, I don't know specifically when your son was murdered. Let me extend my condolences there. And we'll talk about a little bit about maybe the alcoholism and the grief, but let you give a timeline so that we're accurate in asking the questions. But I know that you've experienced a devastating loss, which is the murder of your son, and then later your grandson through some custody issues, which also breaks my heart, because that is a form of grief too, even though the person is still alive. I've had to grieve people that are living, but I'm still grieving them just because they're not in the space of relationship change or whatever it is. What part of that journey changed you the most? And it's probably hard to maybe pinpoint, but that's a layered experience, and you've had a lot of layered experience in your lifetime. Tell me which parts of that changed you the most.
Well, so I would say the burn unit, and I was actually deceased and resuscitated. So I don't have one of those great I saw the light stories, but when I came back from that burn surgeries and out of that coma, I came back with a real thirst and a real inquiry about what happens after death. And I, really took a deep dive into near-death experience stories and where our consciousness goes. And I thought that might be, something that God gave to me as a gift because of what was going to be coming up with my son. So I was sober for about 2.5 years. And my son was having custody issues with his ex-wife, and she was just really railroading him. She was filing false police reports and keeping my grandson from him. And my son's name is Devin. He has got to be like the most a straight arrow kid you've ever met in your life. He didn't drink, he didn't smoke. He was really, really, he loved church, he loved God, and he was really devoted to, his own moral compass. I think that, being raised by me and having all that chaos, he really clung to, quiet, stability, structure. And he was just a really great kid. Everybody really loved him. He was extremely polite. He was just a good man, a good father. He married his wife. He saved himself for marriage, and they got pregnant with my grandson right away. And the marriage it instantly just started to disintegrate. She was really controlling when they had the baby. She no longer wanted to be in an intimate relationship with him, and they ended up getting separated. She kicked him out, and not very long after had a fiance that was a woman, so a same-sex relationship. And during that process, she really took control of any parenting rights he had away. Made it really difficult on him to be a co-parent, to be a good dad. And so he was trying to take her to court to get his visits back. And she was really kind of just making stuff up and telling things that weren't true. And so he did everything he was supposed to do. I mean, this kid just was really calm and methodical. He went through all the accusations. He went to all, the police things that had to be done. And he just kept stepping one foot forward. He loved his son very much. And he had a fiance then. He had was going to have a new marriage. And he was going to start a family. It was just an incredible time in his life. And he was gaining some of that, control back over, what she had taken from him when it came to his parenting rights. And so I actually moved from Texas back to Oregon because I wanted to be able to be there for him. I didn't want him going into the courtroom feeling alone. I know a lot of men, lose their children because they just they can't win, it seems like. And I wanted to make sure he knew, like, I was sober, I was in his corner, that we were going to make sure that he, got rights to his child, that she wasn't going to get to just take him away. And actually, he'd overturned everything and it was going really well for him. And he went ahead and filed for full custody because there was a lot of things that just wasn't okay. My grandson was being told things. He was, being coaxed. He was being coached. And so he filed for full custody. And what happened was, in the process of that, he was kind of afraid of her. And when he would go pick up my grandson, he actually asked her to meet him at the police department, but she wouldn't do that. So he installed a dash cam on his car so that when he would go do any custody exchanges, he could point the camera right out the doorstep so that she couldn't say he did anything. And he was a little scared of her. So, it was December 16th of 2022. It was almost Christmas time. His fiance and I were on the phone. We were making our Christmas plans. He got his visits back. We were going to have my grandson for the first time. And it was just a joyous time. I mean, everybody was so joyful. It was this long period of sadness and, grilling situation for my son and his fiance to finally be over. We were just making plans. And then about 15 minutes later, she called me and asked if I'd heard from him. And I just assumed he was with her, but it was his weekend to go pick up my grandson. And I said, no, I thought he was with you. And he hadn't been going to pick him up alone. But unfortunately, on this day, he decided to go alone, and he pulled up to the doorstep, pulled up the car to the doorstep and knocked on the door. And I'm telling you, no words were spoken, no physical altercation. She opened the door and opened fire on him. She shot him 9 times, and my little grandson was in the home.
Let me tell you something, Jackie. I'm a mother of a son, and of course he's just 8 right now. But that was very heavy for me to hear. Very heavy because of the journey. For one, him trying. There's a kid in the mix. You guys are going through all these legal battles, and I don't know his ex-wife, and I don't want to speak incorrectly really about her even in the face of this tragedy, but it seems like there was some mental illness that could have been going on. And I give you my roses and condolences. Thank you for your courage in recounting that story here. I do not take that at all lightly. I don't know where your grandson is at this time, but just know that my heart, my covering, and my prayers will be with him from the time of this podcast until the rest of the day. I have dedicated that time and space to him because I really can't put into words. I'm not often lost for words doing podcast interviews, but that really just shattered my soul to hear that from you. And I know that you had to live it. Tell me this, because I knowing that your grandson experienced that, and you still know that. Tell me specifically where your heart is as it relates to him coping through knowing that he had a parent murder another. Where are you right now today with that reality?
Well, so as we're doing this podcast, Devin's birthday and his death date just passed, and I launched the book on his third death date. I wanted to change just the way that day felt. I wanted it to bring, comfort to other people, and I wanted to help with our story as best as possible. And it's interesting because Christmas just came and went, and I thought I honestly thought I could cry as much as I could cry in a couple week period, but then Christmas came, and now it's like, oh my God, that hole in my heart for my grandson. And it's not going away. Like it's so painful to know that he's alive and that he's here in a couple states over, and that I can't I can't get to him. I can't touch him. I can't talk to him. I can't, be part of his life. And I fought for him. Oh my God, I fought for him so hard. I went to court. I paid for attorneys. Actually, personally, I'm in bankruptcy from all the legal fees. And, no matter how hard I fought, I just couldn't change the law. And the law was that she was his legal parent and they would not take her custody away. Even though this happened on video, she's still innocent until proven guilty. And she was able to give him to her mother, who has perpetuated the same cycle, the same alienation that she did from my son. And now it's turned to me and the rest of my family. So my son was wiped off the face of the earth, and his whole family's been taken. I did have him temporarily at first. And I also want to say, my background isn't the greatest. I was an alcoholic. I've got, definitely some issues. So going to court, we had a judge that sympathized, and then in the middle of our court date realized that she had prosecuted me. It was like 18 years before that. And didn't remember me, didn't remember the case, but she was asked by the defense to step down as judge. And the new judge that came in insisted that there was no need for a custody hearing, that she maintained her custody rights, that was just the law. So my grandson lives in Montana, or at least I think he does. It's been over almost 3 years since I've spoken to him, since I've seen him, since I've talked to him, since I've got to hold him. And the alienation in that scenario is strong. I've got videotape of the jail where they told him things about the case. They spoke in front of him. I mean, verbally, things that a child should never hear, let alone, be put in that position. I see him sitting on the grandma's lap in a jail video, while they're talking bad about me, while they're talking bad about his dead father. There's a tape where he was asked to call me, where he was allowed to participate in a conversation and call me a liar and things like that. So when I had him, it was a different story. Oh my gosh, when I had him with me, he would take out I have his dad's wallet with his driver's license and his credit cards and things like that. And he would take out his dad's wallet and he would look through it, and he would hold up the driver's license and say how much they looked alike and that he should be allowed to drive to school that day. He found a receipt in his dad's wallet. It was like for $3,400 or something. It was quite a big receipt. It didn't say what it was for. And he said, I bet my dad gave that to a homeless man because he's a nice guy, and his affection towards me, it was just so different when it was us compared to when he would go for his visits with that side of the family. I don't know. It's one of the hardest things that I deal with. And you caught me at kind of a tough time, I guess, a tough time of the year. And I didn't come on the podcast because I want people to feel sorry for me. I really want people to understand that all of these situations happened while I was an alcoholic and in sobriety time, and that it's been 3 years and I never have taken a drink. There's nothing in this world that can ever get me to take a drink. And I've done a lot of insight, deep healing work too, and I really have been blessed to learn energy healing, Reiki techniques. And this kind of tragedy has really asked me to look and to search for what might be out there. Where's my son at? I know he's not just gone. I know he's not, and to learn about where our consciousness goes and to learn about things. So I just really want to make sure that it's not just about how tragic this was. It's about how to stay sober. It's about how to love and forgive, because as an alcoholic, I cannot continue to hold anger and unforgiveness towards these people over this, what was rightfully just to be angry about this, to be rageful about this, to be honest with you. But as an alcoholic, I can't hold on to that. So I had to figure out a way to move through, with that. And I guess I just want people to know, like, your life can go on and you can stay sober. There's just, if I could stay sober through the murder of my son, through being stripped of my grandson, there's just really no reason that anybody needs to take that next drink or use that next drug.
That is so powerful. And what I've learned about this journey, I mean, who would have known, 3 years post your son's murder, that you'll be sitting on a podcast talking to a lady in Houston, Texas. That's one of the things I told you before I started this thing. I don't at all take this lightly. I don't at all take this opportunity to be in this space with you. So however that you need to tell the story and get through these things, you do just that. It's what the podcast and space is for. And I can't thank you enough for doing that with me. I don't at all. I will never forget this, by the way. It's already sparked really some things internally that you don't always think about, because it's one thing to go through death of a loved one, but when it's murder, it's a different level to that, and then, we've had our touch with murder. I have a close friend, her husband was murdered back in 2012. And it just shattered a lot in me. And it's, harder to walk the space. I didn't even have the, the other layer of, sobriety and all these different things. So, of course, my heart is there. Let me ask you this, because it took a lot of strength to stay sober. And the other part is that then you took all of this and then you turned it into a message for others. How did that come apart? When did you know that I do need to turn this into something else? Because it doesn't happen overnight. You're funneling through so many emotions and the levels of grief and the level of this. But then at some point you said, no, I'm going to do something. I'm going to put it in a book. I'm going to go out and start speaking about it. I'm going to go out and start getting on podcasts. When did that shift happen? And really, how did you navigate that, knowing that it was just such a heavy time? You probably didn't even know how to get up some days. But yet here you are 3 years later, going out and educating. How did the shift occur?
I have to say that about 8 months after Devin passed, I was in a group of other people, other parents who have lost their children. And some of the signs I was getting from him and some of the things that I thought I was, seeing or hearing, that I was doubting myself when I got into this group with other people who are experiencing what I was experiencing. I was like, oh my gosh, okay, this is like, I really am hearing from him. I really am getting these signs. And one of the moms gave me a Reiki healing session. And it was about 8 months, and it was the first time I'd felt any peace. It was the first time I felt a reprieve from all that noise and all that stuff in my mind. And I just said, I don't know what this is, but I've got to learn this, and I want to give this to other people. So that was number one. And number two, I don't know how to explain it, but I was so full of guilt and remorse for the way that I raised my kids. And then to have one who was just now permanently gone from this earth, I couldn't live with it. I couldn't live with the, guilt that of how I acted and the drinking and the behaviors that I had when I was trying to raise them. And I didn't know what else to do with that, except for then to say, I promise that I will never do that again, that my other kids will never see me in this condition, that if I ever have a chance to be with my grandson, he will never know me to be this person. He'll never know me to be a drinker or a drug user or to have the behaviors that I had when I was raising his dad. And it hit me so hard that that's the only way out of that pain. It's the only way out of all that guilt and all that shame. And it's the only way to make amends to Devin, who is now in heaven. So I just immediately knew that I would never drink again. And I've never once had a craving. There's not been one time in 3 years where I've ever thought to myself, wow, this is really, really bad. And you know what will make it better is a drink. I owe it to my children. I owe it to, my grandson to just never take a drink again. And so it's actually been easier than I think people might think. There's just this finality about having Devin gone, and needing to do better. So I think that's a couple of things, like the drinking part of it, and how I've stayed sober, and I've done the work. I mean, I'm in, I'm a 12 stepper, so I've done the work, which is, even though people can't imagine, how do you let go of this much anger, from murder or from stealing my grandson? But I can't hold it, because then I will drink. I can't hold that bitterness. I can't hold that resentment, that hatred. So I've had to somehow learn to move through that. And honestly, a lot of it has been done with the spiritual work, with the energy healing, and with knowing that he's not permanently deleted. He's right here, and he sees me. He sees my sobriety, and he sees how hard that I'm working to be a good person for when and if I ever do get the chance to be with his son.
I love that. When I look at your form, you mentioned something about having pressure to fit this spiritual narrative. Like they wanted you to water it down. And you felt pressure in doing that. You talk about, your son still being around in spirit, however you are educating the audience. And I do for sure know, and when I talk about death often, I always mention my aunt who died suddenly back in 2013 at age 43. And there are times where I'm like, man, it feels like it just happened yesterday. And I'm like, well, dang, like how did 12, 13 years pass? Like it's a weird time thing that goes in my head. Like I think if I've accomplished something and like I'm thinking like I would want her to be here, and then I look back and I was like, man, that's been a really long time ago. I wasn't even a mother before, when she was still here. Like so many life things have happened, but it's like a moment in time will take me back to when I just got the call. Very weird timetable that goes on in my head with grief, and I really, really hate that. But I can say that at the most random times, I get such a clear dream of her. So clear, Jackie, that I could feel like I can almost touch it. So clear to where I can describe clothing. So clear to where I can distinctly know the voice. And that alone proves to me that she is still here. Of course, tangible. I can't touch her. I can't hug her. But those moments, and it's like moments, I'm like, oh my God, it's like I'm praying for a dream. I'm like, just give it. It never comes when I want it.
Yeah.
It never ever comes when I want it. You would pray for one around the birthday or holidays, or she left 3 sons behind, or maybe close to one of their big moments or something. That's when you would really want it, but it never comes at that time. It's at the sneakiest time, and I literally wake up like trying to close my eyes back to get the image back, to get the feeling back. One day I specifically smelled her scent that was so intoxicating. And I woke up just like wanting, I'm just trying to do everything. I could never get that moment back, but to know that. And I say, I've come from an older family, always had a lot of people around, which means I've experienced a lot of death, but that was the one death that rattled my soul. And it still does that in times like this, times of Christmas, times of the death day, times of the birthday, times of big family moments. And knowing that she's not there. But I know that you said that you had the pressure kind of to water down what you were processing with your son as him being here, how you experience his spirit maybe. Talk to us about that. I think sometimes people still feel it's almost like a taboo thing. But I can tell you I just told you what my experience has been like with experiencing a loved one after they've left the physical space. So I know for sure. And like randomly, very random time, my great grandmother, who was born in the 1920s, I think, I had her until I was 17, 18, a college, maybe 19 or so. I was a college student when she passed away. So, I had her for a good amount of time. And to randomly get a dream of her, and hers are, of course, very far in between. But there is a time where I can randomly see my 4'9" miniature great grandmother in a dream. She's a miniature feisty lady, but I've seen her. She's miniature, So that to me tells me that when they are able to pass through and give us that, they do. Not at always times that we want, but I want you to talk about that because a lot of people still feel that that's taboo. Some may feel it's scary. I've come to a place and space in my life where I purify my energy, and I know that at the end of the day, I'm just energy, right? So because of that, maybe I'm more, receptive to knowing that their energy could be around, and some people are just not. But where I am, I know that we are all spiritual beings. I know that of course, this body is temporary. And there is something about what I do and deposit in the earth right now that if indeed I leave tomorrow or tonight, it will linger. So I know for a fact, so I know for a fact, though, the spirit and the hard work is so important. So that's why when I hear people's experience of them talking about, life after death, it awakens me because it makes me feel as though I have to be so intentional about cleansing the spirit, keeping it pure and true. Because guess what? This body, Jackie, it's so temporary. It's so temporary. It's going to leave. It's going to go to the dirt. It's going to be eaten by the worms. It's going to be absorbed back into the soil. I know that's, graphic, whatever. But it's really this soul, this energy, this spirit that will be left and that will continue to transcend. So I want you to talk about the question again. I know I've kind of rambled there, but really about that pressure you had to kind of, put this down a little bit. Don't talk about the spirit. Don't talk about him after. What did you do to combat that, and tell us about your experience that you have with your son since he's been gone?
Yeah, so I have to agree with you on a lot of what you're saying that is taboo. I had a lot of even some religious stuff, even though I wasn't even raised religion, but I definitely still had some stuff, that life after death, you didn't talk about it, it wasn't real, or you didn't do that, you didn't mess with that. And so I think one of the reasons I say that in the spiritual community, everybody has to keep their vibration high if you're going to hear from your loved one, and I just don't find that to be true. Devin reached out and gave me a million signs, even when I was in my darkest moments, when I was unable to believe, or unsure of if there was life after death. So I want to say that to other parents, because I feel like we get told basically shame on us if we don't get our signs, because our kids can't come through if we're depressed or if we're sad. And I just say bullshit on that. That's not what I have found to be true. I do think obviously you have to have an opener mind. But if you're in deep grief and you're sad, that doesn't mean that your loved one's spirits can't connect with you, because they can. So that's kind of why I was talking about, watered down. My book has a lot of Devin's signs and a lot of how I ignored them or gaslighted myself over the signs. And then just how he would come back, again and again and again and again until his mom got it, until I had no choice but to go, holy shit, okay, there's life after death because he's right here. And I think the way that Devin communicates with me is through writing. When he first passed, I was so sad, and I was traveling a lot, and I would go places from family member to family member, trying to be okay. And I would go, somewhere, and I would hear what if I thought he would say if he was alive. And I'd hear that. And for some reason, I felt really compelled to write that down. And now, don't get me wrong, I wasn't with it enough I wasn't I was journaling or anything like that. I mean, it could be a back of a receipt, and I would hear something I thought he would say to me if he were alive, and I'd write it down. And it turned into be such a practice. And at first I thought it was just this coping skill. But then after a while, I could just get real quiet and just get really quiet and just kind of imagine that I was bigger than I was, imagine that I'm everywhere. And then I would hear Devin, and I would write whatever he said. And I have some of the most beautiful writings that you can ever imagine, and things that he tells me that I've never heard or that I would never believe myself, that I certainly wouldn't have made up. And the other thing is I write with him early in the morning before I've even had a cup of coffee. And I mean, if you know me, I don't even know what my name is before I've had a cup of coffee, and then I'll just get really quiet, and I'll just, and sometimes I'll just write to him my problems, what I feel or whatever. And then it's just he'll answer me, and I'll write it down. And if on the automatic writing, it looks different. That handwriting where it was listening to him looks different than my handwriting. So it's an interesting It's an interesting concept. And first I didn't believe it, but now I definitely do. And, I'll hear something that he says in the writing and it'll come true later that day or in a couple of days.
Mm, that is so beautiful. It's interesting because was she my last? I've done about this week. I've done maybe about 5 episodes this week, and interestingly enough, I don't think she was the last podcast guest. I think the one before. She actually, her husband died very young, 32, left her a widow at 32 or 33 years old. And she does this, and I encouraged her to do it. I mean, she talks about the concept, a little bit of life after death, but really those tangible things that you have to do immediately when someone dies that we don't talk about. And she was just saying she wasn't ready at 32 years old to go out and pick a song for a memorial service or pick a suit. And I have these, young kids it was a lot of different things. But and maybe this kind of is like, I talked about my kids with my aunt. I remember that because she was just 43 and had, school age boys. And I can remember all these different things of we going to find her a purple dress and trying to figure out like what wig she was going to put on and, trying to write the obituary and like all these different things. So I think this week kind of coming through and talking about these things with you guys, for me, has actually kind of a little bit felt like a relief because number one, it lets you know that you're not alone. And then number two, it's like, dang, you really did come a long way. You really did come a long way from that moment and you don't even know it. You really did survive a lot of emotional toll and you didn't even realize it. So as I told you when I started, we were talking in the beginning before we hit record, I really get the revelation through these conversations. So for her to just kind of come through there, and we spoke, of course, about the emotional toll, but many of our conversation pieces really stemmed around that actual tactical piece. And, where was the will? Where was this? What was the, was there a POA? We talked about all of these different things. And then to kind of have the emotional layer heavy, come a couple of days later, I really am proud of myself for being able to navigate something and still have a little bit of joy to give, Jackie. To have a little bit of love to give, and that should be something that you reflect on because there's so many moving parts, and we don't talk about it nearly enough. We don't talk about this stuff, and people go through this every single day. It's something that none of us are exempt from. None of us are exempt from saying goodbye to our loved ones. None of us are exempt from leaving this place. So to have had these conversations very closely together. Today is what, Saturday? I think Thursday or so. I spoke with her, and and I encouraged her to continue in her mission and talking about these things, not to scare people, but to bring things in a more realistic view. Because many of us, we don't know what we know until we know, and you don't have no choice. At that point, Jack, you don't have no choice but to hunker up. But I think that these conversations are so important to have. What are you hoping? We talked about the book kind of an overlay, but I want you to give us a clean segment, say the name of the book, the overarching goal of the book, and really what you are hoping that is left with people when they get to the end of that book. I've read that book cover to cover, Jackie. Somebody says that. What would you say, just that top thing? What do you want them to get from it?
Well, I wrote the book because I wanted people to have hope after their loved one has passed, because we don't talk about it enough. And just like I felt that it was such a fine finality, Devin was just gone, and it was heartbreaking. I couldn't move on with my life. I couldn't get through it. And I have to say that my relationship with Devin, now that he's passed, is beautiful. So now my son knows every rotten thing I've ever done in my entire existence, and he still loves me so much that he sends me signs. He still loves me and accepts me and does not judge me so much that he's with me all the time, that he's able to accept me. Now that is a healing piece that people need. That is a massive way of staying sober. That is a major way of moving on with your life, is knowing that your loved ones know all about you. They can read your thoughts, and they still love you, and they still show up for you, and they still want to guide you, and they still want to, be that really true unconditional love. I have had actually quite a bit of response from the book. The book is called From Murder to Messages. And that's exactly what it is. It recollects from the day that Devin was murdered to the journey that I went on spiritually, the signs that I received, the resources that helped me, the things that I did that I saw on YouTube, the automatic writings, the meditations, the things that actually, helped me through what I went through. So in the book, I just want people to understand that their loved one is still here, and that it doesn't matter what their past is. You don't have to be, a spiritual guru. You don't have to be, a Baptist preacher to have love, unconditional love from the other side. And so I really wanted to, people to have inspiration and hope from that in the book. And I really did outline some of Devin's signs, in which some of them are undeniable. I was able to document some of them and put photographs in the book as well. So for anyone who struggled with believing in the afterlife, or believing they were worthy enough to receive love and signs from the afterlife, is really what the book is about.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. I can't wait to read it. I should have. I said, man, I took a hiatus from recording a little bit so that we can, clean up this and get things scheduled. But I generally miss podcasting. Like, of course, we batch and then we go, but I miss it so much. But I said I probably should have been recording a little bit earlier in the beginning of the month, so that way I can have all these books to lay on my couch while I was taking a little bit of a break. I still have like a couple from the last sessions that we've had that I've been reading through, but I have a lot of good reads. And these have been ones where, sometimes, and this is honest, like all podcast guests, past podcasts, if you see this, you're almost going to tell the truth. Some of the books that some of my guests write, it's kind of like, well, of course I'm going to read them, but then it's kind of like that, well, I'll read it maybe quarter two or something. But this particular time, these have been books that I'm ready to actually read and dive into. I just have to tell you, I'm grateful for it, because it keeps me connected with you guys post this space. I can really get in there and see what you were working on during that time. And then I get to see this product that's all, I don't want to say a finished product, but I get to see another product and version of you that didn't exist even when you wrote that book. So for me, it gets me a closer connection really to the journey. So I'm just so excited to read that. I'm really, man, Jackie, I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
Okay. I am incredibly proud of you. I am incredibly proud of you for saying, I am choosing me. You have not gone back and picked up the alcohol. You are choosing to keep your son's memory alive. You're writing about it. You're helping others. You published a book. Now, we didn't think or hope that the journey would have to get that rough and rocky and heartbreaking to get to the space that you have arrived to today. But I'm sure glad you made it.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
I am surely glad that you've made it. Is the book, tell us where we can find the book. Is it available on Amazon platforms? Just let us know we can find that, so that we can maybe even perhaps link it for people who are interested in getting the book.
Yeah, I can definitely make sure you have a link. It's on Amazon. It actually is a bestseller on Amazon in the grief and spirituality category. It was amazing. I was so appreciative of Devin, because I know that he showed me the cover of the book, and he started talking about this book in my meditations and in my writings a year before I wrote the first letter of it. So I know it wasn't me by myself. And it is doing what I think what the hope was. I receive messages from people who read it every day who are like, oh my gosh, thank you. Like this, I have questions. And I'm like, so now I'm spending a lot of my time, answering people's spiritual questions, because it is opening people up. It is absolutely making them, go, wow, I wonder if that's possible. I wonder. And so that's the magic of the book. And I'm really grateful for that. But it is on Amazon. And I think you could get it anywhere, to be honest. I think you can get it and order it from Barnes & Noble. I haven't shipped it to any bookstores yet, but there's availability to get it.
Okay, and then give us the name of the book again, Jackie, so that they can have that fresh on their mind.
Okay. It's From Murder to Messages.
From Murder to Messages, you guys go and check that out at Amazon and all of the places. Just Google that; it'll show you all the places where you can go and get that. If you are struggling with perhaps grief and clarity around death, your loved ones, I think it'll be a fantastic read. And also from someone who has worked very hard to get to this place of clarity. I think yours has a different level of context because sometimes grief is heavy, but when you're also keeping up with sobriety, it's kind of a different level as you navigate the space. And let me just say this, Her Voice Shines podcast, when I have not been a good steward of time. It's like 49 minutes. I told Miss Jackie this was a 30-minute set, and I have this lady here, and we're almost hitting 50 minutes. It's been so good these past sessions. I told all of my guests, like, don't you go and tell people that lady had me there for a whole hour. She told me on the 30 minutes, and that was not my intention, but sometimes the conversation is just so good, and I never want to ruin the integrity of these. So this is the part in our show we cue to our guests for final thoughts. I asked our guests to give us some great final thoughts for the space that we shared, and really something that captures the essence of Miss Jackie Suzanne. And I'll be back to close the show after that. I'll cue to you for final thoughts, and I'll be right back.
Well, I have to say, I always encourage people to stay connected. You have to be connected to other people. You have to be connected to your own soul, your own spirit. That is what will ground you, hold you, and keep you moving forward in life, is that connection. When Devin passed, I had probably 500 people stand up and hold me. I couldn't stand up alone. And I had to allow other people to, carry me. And I really think that when we're going through hard times, when we're changing and adapting, and our behaviors are, changing, and we're clearing things from our lives, that we just really need to allow people step up and to be with us.
Absolutely. And let me tell you guys again, if you're not standing up and giving Miss Jackie Suzanne an amazing round of applause for resilience, you should be, because I'm truly proud of her. I really hope that this space and time that we shared together was intentional and it meant something to you, because it surely meant something to me. And for those of you that are out here watching here in the Her Voice Shines podcast land, I tell you that miraculous things happen when you let your voice shine. And guess what? We are all on this planet together, experiencing life, experiencing hardship. So just be a little bit kinder and extend your heart. Like the folk in church say, I love you. Ain't nothing you can do about it. And I'll be back next time with another amazing woman here on the Her Voice Shines podcast. We love you.